Jean Lave, The Situated Learning Theory by Heidi Digby. Desperate Housewives. You probably know it as the rather scandalous show on ABC. But it could very well describe the condition in which Jean Lave found her subjects during her research in 1988. After all, they were able to successfully use mathematics to comparison shop, but found themselves unsuccessful when given the same calculations in a classroom environment. Desperate housewives indeed. Sorry to disappoint you if you were looking for 30 minutes of action on Wisteria Lane, but I think you'll find the latter situation has more influential implications. First, let me introduce you to its originator, Dr. Jean Lave. Jean Lave is a social anthropologist who earned her PhD in social anthropology from Harvard in 1968. She began her research in Liberia, where she observed Gola and Vi tailors. Wenger states Lave's observations convinced her that knowing and learning had to be understood as situated in the activities and trajectories of the apprentices whose new skills were part of their becoming tailors. As previously described, Lave further investigated these insights with housewives back in the United States in what became known as the Adult Math Project. As a result of her studies, Lave has written 3 books and co-authored several others, many with fellow researcher and collaborator Etienne Wenger. Lave's situated learning theory, which will be described in further detail shortly, is relatively young in comparison to other cognitive learning theories. Developed in the late 1980s and early 1990s, it emerged during constructivism, which suggests that learning is based on the construction of knowledge through and active participation in relevant and engaging learning activities. Constructivism ideas directly disputed earlier theories which proposed that learning is done individually and independently. Lave and Wenger also challenged these theories. As previously touched on, they observed in several different populations that learning takes place in social situations with other people. Thus, the aptly named theory of situated learning was born. As stated by the University of South Alabama, the general idea of situated learning is that if you put a learner in a real-world situation, authentic context, and interact with other people, then learning occurs. In other words, learning is not intentional. It just happens as a function of its surroundings. Attention moves away from the individual and is focused on the setting and the people in it, or what Lave calls a community of practice. As cited in Smith, Wenger defines communities of practice as groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. Most people are involved in several of them, through school, work, home, or interests, but their level of involvement may vary. There are 3 essential components that distinguish communities of practice from other groups: a shared area of interest, a shared practice, and an engagement in discussions and activities that lets members share knowledge and learn from each other. In short, they involve extensive time and continuous interaction. Nonetheless, there are distinct advantages to this type of learning. First of all, it fully engages participants and gives meaning to knowledge being acquired. There is no question about the value of what is being learned, for it is naturally accrued, more or less out of necessity. Communities of practice are also efficient. As cited in Smith, Lesser and Stork state that they are an effective way for organizations to handle unstructured problems and to share knowledge outside of the traditional structural boundaries. In addition, the community concept is acknowledged to be a means of developing and maintaining long-term organizational memory. Yet there are disadvantages to consider as well. Situated learning, in its truest sense, is not necessarily feasible for public schooling. Mathematics teachers, for example, cannot be expected to conduct class in a kitchen or other real-life situation every day. In fact, Smith reports, formal education institutions have been less ready to embrace these ideas. There was a very real sense in which the direction of the analysis undermined their reason for being and many of their practices. Also cited in Smith, Tennant offers further criticism, noting that communities of practice can be romanticized by Lave and Wenger. He states, in their eagerness to debunk testing, formal education, and formal accreditation, they do not analyze how their omission of a range of questions and issues affects power relations, access, public knowledge, and public accountability. Lave's theory is not the only one to have received criticism, however. Ivan Illich, author of Deschooling Society, had similar ideas, albeit slightly more radical. Like Lave, he believed learning should be in line with human needs. But while Lave developed her ideas through local experiences and examples, Illich's theory stemmed from harsh criticisms on the entire institution of schooling. According to Smith, he was a vocal critic of formal education, believing that schools had a tendency to end up working in ways that reversed their original purpose. Similar to Lave's community of practice concept, he proposed that education should provide learners with the opportunity to share knowledge with others through what he dubbed learning webs. Learning webs could be facilitated in one of four formats: reference services to educational objects, skill exchanges, peer matching, or reference services to educators at large. Most of them involve a directory of some sort that lists skills or information someone is seeking or offering, along with contact information. Essentially, learning webs are more elaborate and involve more formal planning, as they do not naturally occur like communities of practice. Though Illich's ideas appealed to those seeking informal or experimental approaches to schooling, his beliefs may be a bit too extreme for most educators. Lave's theory, on the other hand, has useful applications for today. As cited in Heron, Wenger states, learning cannot be designed. It can only be designed for, that is, facilitated or frustrated. It is recommended, therefore, that educators design their lessons to foster learning through engaging, meaningful tasks. Students should be involved in activities that model life applications. As the University of South Alabama puts it, the goal of situated learning is to improve learning by motivating students and by providing a rich context for learning. It emphasizes the context and application of knowledge rather than memorizing facts. Lave's theory advises that educators provide students with opportunities for apprenticeships, school-based learning, service learning, etc., and the chance to work with adults in more authentic problem-solving situations than schools typically provide. Besides drawing a distinct connection between learning and activity, Lave's community of practice concept also emphasizes that relationships are a key component to learning. Perhaps educators should embrace this model and strive to make their classroom a place where students work together to solve problems and share information. So what does this theory mean for my classroom? It has certainly made me reconsider the way I structure some of my lessons. I am constantly trying to help my students connect mathematics to their lives, but perhaps I'm going about it the wrong way. Traditionally, I teach my students a concept and conclude the lesson with or spend an additional day on application problems. But maybe if I started with the application and gave my students a reason to need the information, then they might either construct the knowledge on their own or at least understand it better as it is taught. Learning could also be improved if I sought the students' input on what they want to learn. What communities of practice are they currently engaged in? What information do they need to know? By connecting the material to the students' lives, I can make the content more meaningful. Finally, I want to structure my classroom in such a way that it encourages students to share what they learn and know with each other, instead of always being so dependent on my instruction. Ultimately, I want my students to learn and acquire knowledge in ways that are important to them. I close with a quote from Wenger. The difference between mere doing and learning, or between mere entertainment and learning, is not a difference in kind of activity. It is not that one is mindless and the other thoughtful, that one is hard and the other easy, or that one is fun and the other arduous. It is that learning, whatever form it takes, changes who we are by changing our ability to participate, to belong, to negotiate meaning.